Right, hello again. I'm here with Richard Bowser from Property Investing News. Morning to you, Richard.
Yeah, good morning, Peter. Lovely to get online with you.
And to you. Nice to see you. So, your life for the last few years has all been about collecting data and churning it out again. You must be completely upside down now on all of this.
Yeah, it is a very bizarre world that we are collectively in, and of course the implications for that are our working lives are upside down, our social habits are on hold. Until very recently, obviously no one could be going out, and obviously we've had all of the nonsense over the weekend with Cummings saga. But in terms of our daily lives, much of it has been on hold for the last 8, 9, 10 weeks, and working lives are upside down. And there are knock-on consequences all the way through the economy. Same with obviously private landlords, same with commercial landlords. I'm sitting talking to you here in North London, within 100 yards of where I live. I've got literally half a dozen pubs, 5 restaurants, 4 bakers. Most of them are closed, and I don't know when they're going to be reopening.
Yeah. And we're getting a whole mixture of news on resi landlords and commercial landlords. So things are sort of they're happening, but at a very slow pace now. So
indeed, and picking up really on what I just said, but on your initial point about the data for us as a magazine publisher, our reporting, a lot of it is analysis, but based on data, based on trends. So, as I said to you before, we're looking at data at the moment, which is from March and February. Well, it might as well be in 1901. Its relevance to where we are now. And of course, the data that will be coming out and we will be reporting on over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks within the magazine in terms of articles and trends, to some extent, we've got to look at that and say, well, how robust is that data? How long is that data going to be real? Because the patterns of behavior, the patterns of what we're seeing now may not continue, for too long. And hopefully we get back to some degree of normality sooner rather than later, obviously.
Yeah. I know one thing that has been discussed quite a bit recently, and I think you're going to do an article on, is student housing.
Absolutely.
Which is very much up in the air at the moment, isn't it? So
absolutely. So no question about it. I live out in Oxfordshire and Oxford. Our elite universities are huge funding revenue in terms of the UK economy. People perhaps don't appreciate just how much revenue is generated by international students, and the employment base in places like Oxford and Cambridge is massive. They're not large locations in terms of size, and much of the economy is related to, and therefore an awful lot of jobs. And then you've got London and you've got Manchester and Birmingham, where the economy is less dependent. But people should not underestimate the contribution the student sector makes to the UK economy. But also, obviously, it is one of the very strong niches within the revenue streams of private landlords and many HMO landlords. And I know this, that with the SLA, many of your members will derive their income streams, their rents from student properties. So what's going on at the moment is obviously very concerning. Absolutely.
Yeah. And on top of that, particularly in 2 of our big areas of Brighton and Southampton, and in both areas, they've both got 2 universities who seem to be unable to predict what's going to happen in the future. And also, there's an awful lot of institutionalized building going up for particularly freshers and first years, etc. So that's going to affect, and I think they're going to struggle to fill those, quite frankly, let alone the private rental standards system. So
no, it is, it's I just, we feel as if the rug has been pulled from underneath us. So it's all very, what we assumed were the solid foundations of our normal existence as private landlords or as property developers. That rug has been, so we've got very uncertain ground, if we could put it in that context. But yes, we're looking at the student accommodation market and the student sector for our June issue, and I've also already concluded now an interview, which is and it's now based on some positive from a student accommodation provider. They're a sector specialist, someone who's a subscriber to Property Investor News. I've known him now for about 12 years. In that 12-year period, he's gone from being a small-scale private landlord with half a dozen properties to around 2 years ago, he was juggling 22 development projects all around the UK.
Right.
2 of them down on the south coast. Most of them are up in the Midlands area. And then I think there's 1 or 2 up in the northwest and 1 up in Scotland as well.
Yeah.
They have just sold 3 of their schemes, which were completed a few years ago, tenanted by students, and now they've sold off those schemes. But that's been a 6-month sale process, so he's been very, very edgy in recent
I can imagine
what's going on.
Yeah.
So I'm having a refresh call with him later to conclude the second part of the interview, but that'll be going into the magazine, which we go to print next week. But picking up on your point, Peter, about the student accommodation supply, I mean, all private landlords, traditional HMO landlords, will in sectors around the UK will be very aware of the amount of purpose-built student accommodation. It's probably as what they call the alternative real estate sector. Student property has been massively popular for a number of years now, and a lot of big money has gone into it. Big money coming from pension funds, institutional type investment, where they can see the long-term, what they call the long-dated income. In other words, you fund or you build a student block in a popular location where student demand is very solid, and the likes of the legal and generals and the pension funds go, okay, well, now we've got 30 years worth of income in order to be able to correlate against our needs to pay pensions out, etc., etc. That's why there's been such a strong demand for it. And switching on to a slightly separate class that's now flowing into the build to rent. That same institutional-led funding of pension monies, wanting assets which generate long-dated income. That's exactly what we're now seeing with the build to rent sector, with the growth of build to rent. And I'm aware down in Brighton, I think it was Legal and General got planning permission quite recently for a 650 units build to rent scheme in Hove, which will be being built out over the next 3, 4, 5 years, and that was quite recent. So just digressing there slightly onto build to rent.
No, that's interesting stuff. And as you pointed out to me a week or 2 back, Cambridge University upset everybody by announcing they were going to go completely online, and they now seem to be backtracking slightly on that. So, so no, we're not. So, that's good.
Well, I mean, this is an article that I have yet to see. The one that's going into the June edition. It's the way as the editor of the magazine, I give my journalists a brief. I give them some contacts from my personal contact black book to speak to, but I leave it to them. Occasionally, we'll have a sort of midway discussion about what the research they've been doing and their analysis and how that's playing out. But I've yet to see the article, so I don't know where my colleague Peter's got to with it. But absolutely, the Cambridge announcement, and also I think Manchester as well, around about the same time or slightly earlier, has raised massive, concerns. And we had a discussion about it a week or two ago when it was announced. And yeah, the repercussions, are potential repercussions that for student revenues for the universities, but also particularly for our constituency, people that are listening to this discussion, student landlords, are they going to be university students? Are the high-paying overseas students going to be coming? They're the ones perhaps that certainly in London and other places are happy, or their parents are happy to pay the higher quality accommodation standard. They'll they want private flats in nice blocks as opposed to a smallish HMO room, because
yeah, exactly,
that's just the nature of the market.
And perversely, there seems to be a bit of a market at the moment in rough sleepers, because all local authorities are determined to get them off the street. In fact,
yes.
Perversely, they're using some of these purpose-built student blocks for precisely that.
Yeah,
which is not what they intended. But
no, well, it's the same with some of the hotels.
Yeah,
it's like a paradox, isn't it? That something an awful lot of people feel very strongly about. Not wanting rough sleepers on the streets in a relatively successful economy that we have here. That we have this occurring, and now there's this huge incentive, they've literally been able to sweep them up off the streets and achieve what many people have been lobbying for many years.
But we obviously don't know what's going to happen in the future. So hang on, I'm getting a note handed to me.
Yes. Right. Hot off the press.
The shopping list.
Right, okay.
Life carries on, you see. So.
Absolutely, yeah. We're out of caviar, are we?
Yeah, something like that. And also, I was having a conversation with Ian Fletcher from British Property Federation last week or so, and well, we all know Ian, so all right, Ian, put your thinking head on. What's going to happen in the future? And he was very firm with the opinion. Well, res is okay. That's firm. Commercial is just completely shot.
Yes.
Apart from, he says, I can just see a whole load of even more conversions of shops into resi.
Yes.
That'll just end up totally destroying the high street. I mean, it's nearly destroyed now, but they'll just totally destroy it, or we'll give it a different feel.
Absolutely. I think, obviously there's the planning hurdles.
Oh yeah.
Come and there will be locations which, quite frankly, are dying anyway, and are already on a pretty inevitable state of death throes in terms of secondary retail in certain locations. The prime locations, it's hard to see that occurring. Because planning will be used to block. We've obviously, Property Investor News, there's barely a month goes by without us publishing something in relation to retail commercial property and trends. And in fact, in the latest magazine, I'll just show you the page here. This was our latest call on the market, and that directly feed, and that's on industrial property and the outlook for logistics, which is probably the one positive area within commercial property. But of course, values for warehouses and logistics, it's gone through the roof because there's so much money chasing good product. I think it's and also, obviously there's patterns coming out of this, and this is being seen with lockdown, because many people are sitting online, their wives or their partners, they're twiddling their thumbs, and so they can get onto some of these shopping sites and have stuff delivered to, that's the other thing, isn't it? With this lockdown, we've had 9 weeks of people. A lot of people are being paid their salaries. They're being okay, for lots of people on furlough and what have you, but lots of people are getting a full income, but the sort of 20-25% of their income, which normally goes on disposable stuff, which is the non-necessary, that's been in some cases being stored up. It's not being spent because they're not going to the pub, they're not going to restaurants. And so therefore people have got more purchasing power. And some people have been spending that on online shopping. And that then flows through, obviously. But we've also got scenarios where, warehouses are full of stuff that people at the moment don't want delivered. So you've got all sorts of complexities around that. But there's no question, going back to your point and referring to what Ian Fletcher from the British Property Federation said, commercial property, with the exception of, I would say, of logistics, industrial property, warehousing, is absolutely, not in a good place. Offices, big offices, there's a huge question mark now about big offices in the likes of central London or our other big cities.
This kind of thing, can't they, sir?
Pardon?
Everybody could do this kind of thing. They could have video conversations.
So, I mean, obviously, you cannot beat the, around the coffee table type interaction. Let's put all our thoughts on the table. You can do it with these types of Zoom meetings, but there isn't that say, and I think employers do recognise that. But absolutely, it'd be fascinating to see what emerges from this in the years ahead, notwithstanding the hopefully short-term fears we have around the coronavirus and when it will be effectively safe as a society to resume normal service. And that in itself is a big question, obviously, because there is no vaccine. There's a possibility that we might have something. There are, in the news at the moment, there's a couple of stories about some treatment options which seem to be gaining a bit of favour, but there's no magic silver bullet yet at all, and it's likely that we won't have an effective vaccine until next year. So we've got to somehow muddle through. And when I look out at the way that the British behave in comparison with the way some other countries behave, who have got much less shocking death rates than we have, you do have to question what's going to happen in a week or two, or whenever it might be, when the schools go back and this lockdown lifts. Because the big fear that we must have is about a second wave. Absolutely, in my opinion.
And if we go on to that, there's this talk of today actually of mini lockdowns, which will affect individial economies. And again, I suspect that the winners will be the couriers and the online delivery people. So perhaps you should change it from properly invested news to properly courier news. So.
Well, quite. Bizarrely enough, I was thinking the other day about an article that we wrote, I think it was about a year or two ago, on automation and robotics in the magazine. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Milton Keynes, they've been trialling these delivery robots. And so it's like everything, we'll do an article and then we'll move on to a different subject and you forget about, but obviously there's no question this stuff is going to be coming in. And drone delivery is another one. Also, London is absolutely going to be turned into, or central London, into a car-free zone now, sooner rather than later. I think that's another consequence of what we've been experiencing. I think politicians have realised that they've got a remit now, that's areas of relative sensitivity that they might have thought that they would have to wait a number of years to be able to get through. So I'm absolutely clear in what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing that the major city centres, London, Birmingham, etc., Manchester, and perhaps larger towns as well, you're going to see more and more councils becoming ever more rigorous about car-free locations. And then, of course, that then poses another, how do we get these deliveries to these homes? What is the impact, therefore, on people's lives in where they choose to live? Are we going to see less people wanting to live in city centres? That's something we're looking at for an article for the magazine. In fact, it relates to an article I only did 2 months ago on Birmingham, because in that article I can remember saying, well, 30 years ago, the likes of Birmingham and other city centres in the UK away from London, parts of those cities were empty, relatively empty of populations once the city centre businesses close.
Yeah.
But in the last 30 or so years, places like Birmingham have become much more attractive. So there's been massive growth in city centres, apartment blocks. But might that now perhaps be reversed? I don't know. Because
this talk of making traffic-free centres. I remember an interesting case many years, 30, 40 years ago, in the centre of Norwich, where they were talking about making it traffic-free in the days when it didn't really happen very much.
yes,
It was against it, and then they were actually forced into it for a couple of weeks because there was some, I don't know, they had some major roadworks there to do, and they had to close this particular road for a couple of weeks, and everyone's business went up. And they all went, oh, actually, it's a good idea.
Well, I think it's the law of unintended consequences we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And so politicians make decisions, whether it's through lobbying, whether it's through pressure, whether it's through, well, other things as well. Let's not go down there. But politicians make decisions, and local authorities act, and then of course there are unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're not so good.
Yeah.
So I mean that's basically what we as a publisher, we're trying to look ahead. We're trying to look into the tea leaves of patterns and trends and data, as I referred to at the beginning of our conversation, in order to give people a steer. And who'd have said a year ago that people doing serviced accommodation, whether it be for the contractor market or whether it be for the Airbnb type market, would basically see their business model shot down in flames pretty much, as we've seen in the last few months. And the whole hospitality and tourism, the hotels, and how quickly might that be able to bounce back this summer? How cautious are people going to be to not go to the seaside? Obviously, people will go to the seaside. People will go to the Lake Districts and what have you, particularly if they can't fly abroad or they don't feel comfortable about going abroad. But will they want to stay? That's another question. We did a really good interview with a hotelier down in North Devon that I visited last autumn on a project that they've been working on for about 10 years. And it's a lovely scheme. It's down in North Devon in Woolacombe, I think it was. And 54 apartments built on the back of an old seaside hotel.
Yeah.
Most of the apartments sold to people who bought them as investments, but some of them wanted them as part investment, part holiday home. Swimming pool, gym, lovely restaurant, sea views, great location. What are their prospects for this summer? I don't know. So that's another sector that's obviously been very badly impacted by the events of the last 3 months. And again, big question mark as to what the outcome, what we're going to see in the next few months. People's confidence to want to get in their car, drive to these locations, to stay. I don't know. You're down on the south coast, Peter. You're probably, some of your members will be, their incomes will be directly related to the hotel and hospitality sector. So it'd be interesting to hear what some of their views are and what they're seeing in terms of bookings and reservations for, July, August.
There is a general feeling that holiday lets are a thing to get into in the future. Because it's always had a decent tax structure to it.
Yes.
Also, more and more people, as you've already alluded to, will not be wanting to go abroad.
Yes.
You can't even drive abroad at the moment, can't you? So you certainly don't want to fly.
No.
So well, why not drive to the West Country or wherever? And if you can get your holiday let, or possibly your Airbnb, but definitely your holiday let, and to be reassured it's been properly cleaned and sanitized, seems to be a fair way to go, I would have thought.
No, again, it's something that we've got on our editorial schedule for July/August for obvious reasons. And in fact, the accommodation, the site that I was mentioning in North Devon, that most of the units were sold to investment people, buying them as investments, with knowing that the holiday let tax structure was far more favourable, has become far more favourable than your traditional buy-to-let model, which has obviously been impacted strongly by Section 24 in recent years.
Yeah.
So, and we went into that in quite some detail in the article interview that I did with the hotel owners. And I think that was last autumn. I'm trying to remember which month now, but yeah, I mean, and you just made a lot of points which we're very aware of, that who is going to have the confidence to stand at Luton or Gatwick, any airport with that, in queues, and then be in a condensed space. You might feel more comfortable this side of the channel, but when you get out at the other side, in whatever airport it might be, how rigorous they're going to be there.
Yeah.
Or maybe quite the reverse. In fact, their standards of space, of keeping people social distancing, may be better, maybe more robust than ours, because some of these countries, unfortunately, Spain and Italy come to mind particularly, and also France, have also experienced pretty horrendous death rates because of COVID-19.
But I mean, talking of the air travel, of course, you've got this situation where even if they leave a lot of seats empty, you still got the recirculation of air within the aircraft.
Yeah.
You've only got to have one person at the front and one person at the back, and
I'm not technically qualified to comment about the filtration system of aircraft air systems, but there's obviously a concern. Yeah, absolutely, it's a big concern, but obviously if you're with your family and you drive to the airport in your car, you get out, and at the other end you hire your hire car, and then you go off to your villa. To some extent, you're with the same family group, and then you've got exactly the same scenario to deal with, whether it be in the UK or whether it be anywhere in Europe or wherever you go to, that you are self-contained and you're in a self-contained environment. But I absolutely agree with you. The point you just making is, and I definitely can see a trend, particularly this year, for holiday let accommodation, and the absolutely, service accommodation sector.
You have to start letting out the property investor news jet, won't you, to people? So
I wish.
The private jet.
Well, there was that bizarre story, I think, in the very early days of the lockdown, where those, I think there were a party of about a dozen, clearly people with far more money than sense, that they hired a private aircraft and took off and went down to Marseille and had hired an outrageously costly villa. Bank holiday weekend, and when they arrived in Marseille airport, they didn't get off they got as far as the runway, and they didn't get off the plane, or because the front and the back, which was quite an amusing little.
Yes. Well, you kind of laugh. And then changing the subject a little bit, exhibitions. You and I, we have attended an awful lot of exhibitions. I can't see those going ahead this year. Can you?
No, well, both of us, Peter, we're quite good at making an exhibition of ourselves. So
we don't need to go anywhere, do we?
Seriously, no. I mean that for us as a publisher and is it's a concern, because we typically are exhibiting at various events on a monthly basis, and some of the big exhibitions obviously attract an awful lot of attendees. It's hard to say where we're going in terms of, some people are being very optimistic about the likelihood of a resumption of property events. I struggle to see anything occurring on any scale at all this side of the early autumn at best. But you know, well, any gatherings of any size. So, you know, whether that be, you know, where I'm 75 yards away from where I am sitting here now, I've got a theatre and a pub and a restaurant. So, you know, it's a small theatre, but would you want to sit in a room with 60 or 70 people crowded? No. You know, unless you go to Savile Row and order a port and down suit, then you know, yeah.
And we, as you're aware, we do hold regular landlord meetings. We've cancelled all those.
Yes.
Certainly for the foreseeable future. And we're going to try next week, funnily enough, we're going to try not a webinar as such, but, you know, an online meeting to see if people dial into that in an old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Just to see what happens, won't it? So.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of this stuff going on, and the experience is not obviously at a level. It's not the same as being in a physical room, being able but for the time being, it's what we have. Thankfully, we do have the technology. You know, 10 years ago, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have GoToWebinar. I mean, I did an event last night with some of our subscribers to Property Investor News. I had 160 people engaged and some really good presentations, and that worked very well. But you know, that's a short, sharp experience. Proper networking is a lot more difficult to do, in my experience, online compared to the physical in the room, and that social engagement that you get at a meeting, where things can just, you know, so. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that by early autumn, you know, we may get some resumption. But of course, when I look at some of the behaviours that I'm seeing when I'm out and about occasionally with people, and a complete lack of respect for others' space. One comment that I made online in a social media space a few weeks ago was social distancing. Do you know what 2 meters is? It's the length of a coffin.
Yeah, yes, good point. And on that note,
always end on a high note, Peter.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, Richard. It's been great talking to you as ever. So,
yes,
and I trust, you know, it won't be too long before we can share a glass of wine again. So, you know,
look forward to it.
I look forward to that very much. So, you know, thank you, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Peter.